Welcome back, everyone, to the Wedge 52 Gridiron podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the Around the League Week 2 recap, as well as a couple other things. I'll start with my recap for Week 2, head over to the hymn performance of the week, and then a quick sneak peek preview of Week 3, as well as my Week 3 picks. Before we jump in today, please make sure you press that follow button right here on Spotify, rate the podcast, and check me out on Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron. With that being said, let's jump in with the Thursday night football game that we had in Week 2. The Eagles came out victorious over the Vikings 34-28. Kirk Cousins and actually several players from the Minnesota Vikings played well, but they also had a few flaws that ultimately ended up leading to them losing that game. Kirk Cousins had 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions, but he did have a fumble. Justin Jefferson had 11 receptions for 159 yards, and rookie wide receiver Jordan Addison had another great game with his second career touchdown, 3 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown, as well as tight end TJ Hawkinson had 7 receptions for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. Running back Alexander Mattison for the Minnesota Vikings is still struggling severely. If this continues for another game or two, I would not be surprised if the Vikings start to look towards other options, whether that be on their roster currently or via the free agent market. But Madison had 8 carries for 28 yards. Not really what you're looking for to see out of your starting running back. Obviously, that Eagles defense is good. That front 7 is good. But, second week in a row struggling. As for Madison, it's not what the Vikings were hoping to see when they decided to move on from running back Dalvin Cook. For the Eagles, Jalen Hurts went 18 for 23, only 193 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So not crazy spectacular numbers on his part either. If you told me to pick Cousins or Hurts numbers, I would pick Kirk Cousins numbers every single time, almost, I believe, in this case right here. Wide receiver Devontae Smith had himself a nice day, 4 receptions for 131 yards and 1 touchdown, while DeAndre Swift, running back for the Eagles, turned around his season. It's only been 2 weeks. Week 1, Swift only had 1 carry for 3 yards. That was not the case Week 2's Thursday Night Football, where Swift carried the ball 28 times for 175 yards and 1 touchdown. He looked much better. Kind of looked back to, the flashes that we've seen when he was healthy, back when he was a Detroit Lion. Moving on to the Ravens versus Bengals. The Ravens won that game 27-24. If you would like a full in-depth analysis on my Ravens versus Bengals on that game, please check out my other episode that released yesterday right here on the Wedge 52 Gridiron. A little update since that podcast released just yesterday. Darius Washington for the Baltimore Ravens has played in every snap or nearly every snap for us this season for the Ravens. Got moved to IR because of a chest injury that I did not see any reporting on. And it seems like most other people didn't really see at all either. So he will be out at least 4 weeks. The Ravens are hoping for cornerback Marlon Humphrey to be making his return soon. The Ravens won the game against the Bengals. Lamar Jackson and the offense started clicking. Things looked very good for them. Lamar Jackson was very efficient with the football. I had a couple nice throws. And our defense, the Ravens defense, stepped up when it needed to against Joe Burrow and that Bengals offense there. The Seahawks beat the Lions 37-31 in overtime. Jared Goff had 323 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Detroit Lions had 6 receptions for 102 yards. And Josh Reynolds for the Lions had 5 receptions for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Lions seemed to be in control for most of this game. until that late in that fourth quarter, which I'll talk about in a second here. Seahawks quarterback, former Jet Geno Smith, had 328 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. While running back Kenneth Walker had 17 carries for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns. And wide receiver DK Metcalf had 6 receptions for 75 yards. And then wide receiver Tyler Lockett for the Seattle Seahawks had 8 receptions for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. One of those being the walk-off touchdown for the Seattle Seahawks in overtime. That game, I believe, should not have really even went into overtime, as the Detroit Lions were playing much more conservative than, kind of what they're accustomed to, and, what the Dan Campbell approach usually is. Detroit had the ball around the 50 with 3 timeouts, just under the 2-minute warning, and decided to slow play. Didn't really take any shots to try and get into touchdown scoring range, but instead elected to kick the field goal with 3 seconds remaining on the clock and send the game to overtime, where the Seattle Seahawks won the coin toss and Detroit did not touch the football. So that's definitely interesting. Not really what the Lions and, Dan Campbell has instilled into the Lions in their grittiness over the past couple of seasons. So definitely an interesting take there. And then safety or defensive back for the Detroit Lions, C.J. Gardner-Johnson potentially has a season-ending injury. It looks like he's having a pectoral issue. He was placed on IR, I believe. So we're kind of waiting. The Lions are kind of waiting to see how that plays out and see if he's able to have a shortened recovery like Ravens safety Marcus Williams, who also went down with a pec injury in week 1. Moving on to the Buccaneers versus the Bears. The Buccaneers won that game 27-17, moving up to 2-0, and pushing those Chicago Bears down to 0-2. Baker Mayfield was solid again, nothing spectacular, but did just enough to get the job completed. Baker Mayfield was 26 for 34, 317 yards, which is good, very good there. You'll take that most games, I believe. But just 1 touchdown and no interceptions for Baker Mayfield, leading that Buccaneers offense. Rachaad White, Tampa Bay's running back, had himself a nice little day. 17 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown, as well as Mike Evans balled out again in what is probably his last season as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. He had 6 receptions for 171 yards and a touchdown. The Buccaneers defense had 6 sacks on that Chicago offensive line on Justin Fields in that game. Fields, I don't quite see what's going through Fields' head at the moment. There's, several clips posted up on the internet after the game of him just blatantly missing open wide receivers on multiple occasions. Justin Fields went 16 for 29, 211 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. While newly acquired wide receiver DJ Moore had 6 receptions for 109 yards. Definitely interesting there to see kind of what happens with Justin Fields, and see if he can kind of turn things around here quickly. Now that, his offensive line is still struggling, but Fields, has a couple of pieces that they've added to try and help him out, and it seems like he's only gone in the opposite direction. The Bears linebackers, Edmonds and Edwards, combined for 28 tackles, so they were all over the field for that Chicago defense. Moving to the Packers versus Falcons game, the Packers came back after being down pretty big and won that game 25-24 at home in Atlanta. Jordan Love did not throw for many yards, only 151, but did have 3 passing touchdowns again and no interceptions. Rookie wide receiver for the Packers out of Michigan State, Jayden Reed had 4 receptions for 37 yards and 2 touchdowns, while linebacker for the Packers, Quay Walker, followed up his incredible pick 6 that he had week 1 against the Bears by having 17 tackles on Sundays in Sunday's loss to the Falcons. Now, quarterback Desmond Ridder, efficient, did what he had to do to get his team a victory, had 237 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, while rookie running back Bijan Robinson balled out once again and put on display some of his incredible jukes and jump cuts, dropping multiple defenders on one play. He finished the day with 172 total yards on the ground and receiving. And then wide receiver Drake London had 6 receptions for 67 yards and a touchdown in Sunday's victory against the Green Bay Packers there. Moving on to the Colts versus Texans game. The Colts were able to win that game 31-20, even though quarterback Anthony Richardson left the game with a concussion very early on. Anthony Richardson was very productive and looked good before the concussion came, before he got concussed. He went 6 for 10 for 56 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, as well as 3 rushes for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns. On that second rushing touchdown, he kind of pulled up, in my opinion, which led to the defender taking a shot at him. The hit was clean, everything was clean, but Richardson hit the ground and the back of his head hit the turf, which is where I believe the concussion came from. I mentioned it previously that Anthony Richardson needs to protect his body, especially as a younger quarterback who's very mobile. If you make defenders miss, the defenders are going to take the chance to hit you when they can. So, got to be smarter. If he would have just finished that run hard, he would not have gotten hit. But quarterback Gardner Minshew stepped into that game and was actually very, very productive, going 19 for 23, 171 yards, 1 touchdown, and no pick. He had help from his running back, Zachary Moss, who had 18 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown. And that Indianapolis defense looked very good, was very strong. The Indianapolis Colts defense also had 6 sacks on C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans on Sunday. Quarterback C.J. Stroud, however, being sacked 6 times, did look very good, was throwing some good passes. He's making smart decisions with the football. He went 30 for 47, had 384 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and no interceptions on Sunday. His main wide receiver on Sunday was Nico Collins, who had 7 receptions for 146 yards and a touchdown, as well as Robert Woods, who had 6 receptions for 74 yards, and rookie wide receiver Tank Dell had 7 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown there. So good day for Stroud, although losing by 2 scores. Now we move on to the Chargers versus Titans game. The Chargers lost that game 24-27 in overtime as well. I really don't understand how the Chargers are finding ways to lose these games. They are now 0-2. Once you hear the numbers, you're going to be a little bit shocked as well. Justin Herbert, 27 for 41, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Keenan Allen had 8 receptions for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. They were, however, without running back Austin Eckler, who is a very large part of what they do, both receiving and, as we saw Sunday, is kind of their sole contributor to any rushing attack that they had. Their rushing game was very, very, very lackluster on Sunday, which ultimately led to them being predictable and helped that Titans defense, kind of corner that Chargers offense into plays and down and distance that benefited the defense. The Chargers were, however, 3 for 3 on 4th down. So something to kind of maybe keep your eye on as you're watching the Chargers this season is if there is critical moments on 4th down, it does seem like they, at least as of right now, have a couple of plays that work successfully in that situation. Quarterback Tannehill turned his efforts around after a very poor Week 1 performance where I believe he had 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, I want to say. Turned that one around, went 20 for 24, 246 yards, 1 touchdown, and no picks this week against the Chargers. And Derrick Henry did his thing with 25 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown. Moving on to the Raiders versus Bills game. The Bills came back, came back to form after that Week 1 loss to the New York Jets, and they stomped the Raiders 38-10. Jimmy Garoppolo for the Raiders went 16 for 24, 185 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Davante Adams, looked as he does in his top 5 respectable ranking there, having 6 receptions for 84 yards and a touchdown, while, potential top 5 running back Josh Jacobs, who is also very high on my top 5 running backs episode. Go check that out if you haven't yet. But Josh Jacobs had 9 carries for -2 yards and 0 touchdowns. Wow, I do not see him, having that kind of flunder again. But, however, he did have 5 receptions for 51 yards receiving on Sunday for the Las Vegas Raiders. And then, Raiders linebacker Robert Spillane had 14 tackles and a sack on Sunday. So very good effort by him. He was doing everything he could to stop that Bills offense. And then Josh Allen turned things around very, very severely to his Week 1 performance where he had 4 turnovers. Josh Allen went 31 for 37, 274 yards, and 3 touchdowns with no picks. Bills running back James Cook went 17 for 123. And then that was on the ground for James Cook, obviously. And then wide receiver Gabe Davis had 6 receptions for 92 yards and a touchdown, while wide receiver Stephon Diggs had 7 receptions for 66 yards. The Buffalo Bills were able to double up the time of possession to the Raiders, 40 minutes and 4 seconds to 19 minutes and 56 seconds. That is just crazy to think about, that they completely doubled them up in time of possession there. That Raiders offense, besides a couple of drives, just could not do anything. Moving over to the Chiefs versus Jaguars. This game was very hard fought, between the Chiefs and Jaguars. The Chiefs ultimately came out on top 17-9 in what was probably a much lower scoring game than most fans would have expected going into that. Pat Mahomes had 29 out of 41 completions for 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Travis Kelce made his return, his season debut, after missing the game against the Lions with a hyperextended knee. He was quiet, but did find the end zone, 4 for 26, and a touchdown on the day for Mr. Travis Kelce. And then wide receiver Sky Moore looked like he could potentially be turned into Kelce's go-to guy. We've seen Sky Moore kind of develop in that playoff run for them last year. But on Sunday against the Jaguars, Sky Moore had 3 receptions for 70 yards and a touchdown, while Chris Jones, signed that contract or restructured incentives with the Kansas City Chiefs. And, in his return, he had 2 tackles and 1.5 sacks for Kansas City. Trevor Lawrence, not the greatest day for Trevor Lawrence. His standards, 22 for 41, 216 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Wide receiver Christian Kirk had 11 receptions for 110 yards. And, the reason this game was so low scoring, part of it was that both teams struggled on third down to execute and move those chains. I didn't write down the exact numbers, but I want to say They were both around 3 for 14, 4 for 13, in that range. Around 30% to maybe 40% on third down, which is not going to get it done long term for either of those teams. We'll see how that develops. I'm sure Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm sure they will figure it out. Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce. Moving on to the 49ers and Rams. 49ers won that game 30-23. Brock Purdy got his first regular season win as a starter without throwing 2 or more touchdowns. He had 205 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 0 picks for the Niners. And then CMC did his usual thing that he's capable of when he can stay on the field, with 20 rushes for 116 yards and a touchdown. And then Deebo Samuel, wide receiver, running back, Swiss Army knife for the 49ers, had 101 total yards. That Rams offense actually surprised me. The Rams offense looked really, really good against the 49ers. Matthew Stafford looked confident. He was firing the ball in there again, throwing his receivers, putting the ball where his receivers can get it. And Stafford, they relied heavily on that passing game. Matthew Stafford threw the ball 55 times on Sunday against the 49ers, completing 34 of them, and finished the day with 307 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Kyren Williams got the start at running back after a solid Week 1 performance, and he had 14 rushes for 52 yards and a touchdown, while having 6 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown receiving. Cam Akers was on the healthy scratch list for the for the Rams, and did not suit up for that game. Cam Akers, it seems to be currently on the trade block, and the Los Angeles Rams are listening to phone calls to potentially ship out Cam Akers. Definitely an interesting situation. Akers had a solid Week 1 game, as well as the last 3 games he played in at the end of the 2022 season. He had over 100 rushing yards in 3 straight games. So definitely odd, definitely interesting to see how that develops. Speaking of developing, Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua, I believe is how you say it, had 15 receptions for 147 yards. 15 receptions is crazy good. I believe he set a record for most receptions in the first 2 games by a rookie receiver. It's going to be interesting to see how long he can hold this streak going. See if defenses start throwing more complex coverages at him, if he can still, perform at that level or close to it, as well as what happens when Cooper Kupp comes back for that Rams offense there. Other wide receiver Tutu Atwell also had another good day as well, having 7 receptions for 77 yards. Now we move to the Giants versus Cardinals game, where the Giants came back from down 28-7 with 3:31 in the third quarter, and they won that game 31-28 against the Cardinals. Saquon scored that touchdown right at the 3:30 mark in the third quarter to put them down 14. James Conner was kind of the only bright spot for that Cardinals offense. Had 23 carries for 101 yards and a touchdown. Quarterback Daniel Jones had a little bit better of a game than he did against the Cowboys, going 20 for 37, 321 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 1 interception. Jalen Hyatt had 2 long catches, 2 for 89 yards, no touchdowns for him. But I think those were both, I want to say it was like a 50-yarder, or like 55, and, whatever the remainder is, around 30 there. And then Saquon Barkley had 17 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown, as well as 6 receptions for 29 yards and a touchdown through the air. He did, however, leave the game late with what looked like a pretty serious injury. Reports are saying it's just an ankle sprain, an average, normal, caliper ankle sprain. which means, he could potentially miss around 3 weeks till recovery time. As of right now at the recording, he has not been placed on IR. So that's definitely a good sign for Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants, who are definitely going to be in need of Saquon and his capabilities if the Giants want to, continue to have success with their team. The other New York team, the New York Jets, lost to the Cowboys 30-10. Zach Wilson went 12 for 27, 170 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions against that, very, very good Cowboys defense. Running back Breece Hall had the worst game of his career, 4 carries for 9 yards. He tweeted and then deleted, or X'd and then deleted after the game, saying that the Jets lost because he only got 4 carries. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver for the Jets, had another touchdown, 2 receptions for 83 yards and a touchdown against the Cowboys. Quarterback Dak Prescott looked efficient and locked in again, having 31 completions on 38 attempts, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. While running back Tony Pollard had 25 carries for 72 yards. So not the most efficient there. But, still, looked good. Definitely they can count on him right now. 25 carries is among the higher amount of carries for any running backs out of week 2. And then wide receiver CeeDee Lamb had 11 receptions for 143 yards. Leading that, very good-looking Cowboys defense was none other than Micah Parsons, who had 4 tackles, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery on Sunday against the New York Jets. The Washington Commanders beat the Broncos 35-33. Sam Howell, again, doing what he needs to do to get the job done after, kind of wondering who the starting quarterback for the Commanders was going to be at the beginning of the season. Sam Howell and, Eric Bieniemy are showing that the Commanders, so far at least, have made the correct choice. Sam Howell went 27 for 39, had 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, and protected the football with 0 interceptions. Scary Terry McLaurin made his season debut. He had 54 yards on 5 receptions and a touchdown. And then running back Brian Robinson was all over the field. Brian Robinson looks like he's got potential to be a very good running back. On Sunday against the Broncos, he had 18 carries for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, as well as 2 receptions for 42 yards through the air. That Washington Commanders defense, kind of proved or showed a lot of people's suspicion on how they could be one of the better defenses in the league, having 7 sacks against Russell Wilson and the Broncos on Sunday. Speaking of Russell Wilson, he had 18 for 32 completions, 308 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception on the day. His number 1 wide receiver against the Commanders was Marvin Mims. He had 2 receptions for 113 yards and a touchdown. And then also Denver wide receiver Brandon Johnson had 2 receptions for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns there. The Denver Broncos had a successful Hail Mary at the end of the game. The ball was tipped, caught by a Broncos receiver, and scored for the touchdown to put them down 35-33. They obviously went for the 2-point conversion to try and send the game into overtime. And the 2-point conversion was ultimately no good. There was a lot of contact on that final play. But there was no flag thrown. I know that's been pretty controversial, since it happened Sunday there. But no flag thrown. You can't really blame everything on one play. I know it's hard when it's the last play of the game in terms of, officiating, potentially not being there. But, I'm sure the Broncos had many chances to, many things they can clean up throughout the rest of the game. Moving on to the Sunday Night Football action, the Miami Dolphins won that game against the New England Patriots 24-17. Tua, not as crazy numbers as week 1, but still decent. 21 for 30, 249 yards, a touchdown, and 1 interception. Running back Raheem Mostert had 18 carries for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle, 4 receptions, 86 yards. And cornerback for the Patriots, Christian Gonzalez, did very well against Tyreek Hill, all things considering. Tyreek only had 5 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. And then Mac Jones did what he needed to. You definitely would have liked to see him have a little bit more help on offense. But Mac Jones was 31 for 42, 231 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception on Sunday. Now leading into our Monday Night Football doubleheader. Almost wrapped up through here with the Week 2 games. The first game of the night was the Saints versus the Panthers, where the Saints edged them out 22-17. Derek Carr had 228 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Taysom Hill took quite a bit of snaps, only threw 1 pass that he completed for 8 yards, but had 9 carries for 75 yards. Wide receiver Chris Olave had 6 receptions for 86 yards, and running back Jamal Williams went down early with a hamstring injury for the New Orleans Saints, but Tony Jones stepped in and found pay dirt. 12 rushes for 34 yards and 2 touchdowns for him. And then rookie quarterback for the Panthers, Bryce Young, went 22 for 33, 153 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions in the loss to the Saints. Linebacker for the Panthers, though, looked very good. Frankie Luva, 9 tackles and 2 sacks. So that's going to kind of see, interesting to see if he develops into being another piece of a young, good-looking Panthers defense. And then the final game of the night, the Browns versus Steelers, final game of Week 2. The Browns ended up losing that game 22-26. But what I think they may be more concerned about is losing running back Nick Chubb, one of the best running backs in the league for the past couple of years, past 3 or 4 years. Had a brutal knee injury and will be done for the season. Before Chubb went out, he had 10 carries for 64 yards. Efficient as always by Nick Chubb. You don't like to see that for any player, but especially a top player like that. Stepping into his place, Jerome Ford had a decent game. He had 16 rushes for 106, a good game. I should not say decent, especially considering the circumstances. 16 carries for 106 yards, as well as 3 receptions for 25 yards and a touchdown. Jerome Ford looked good. He was potentially a sleeper heading into the season for the Cleveland Browns, to be that running back 2 spot. And now the Browns are going to see if, he can shine as running back 1, while they may potentially also be exploring other options at the tailback position. Quarterback Deshaun Watson struggled, going 22 for 40, 235 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 2 fumbles. Watson, not looking good yet, not looking anywhere close to worth the money that the Browns paid for him. It's definitely early in the season, but Watson, I think, needs to turn it around to be able to be successful throughout the rest of the season here. Kenny Pickett had 15 completions for 30, 15 out of 30 completions. Wow. 222 yards, a touchdown, and 1 interception. Wide receiver George Pickens had 4 receptions for 127 yards and a touchdown. Good day by Pickens again. I think Pickens can be potentially developing into one of the top wide receivers. For his sake, he's hoping that Kenny Pickett can stay good enough to, get him the ball consistently. I'm not sold on Kenny Pickett being, the next it guy, the next long-term franchise for the Steelers, but it's still very early in his career. So we'll see how that develops. And then a couple of defensive stars for the Steelers on that Monday Night Football game. Alex Highsmith had 7 tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumbles. That was scoop and scored for a touchdown and 1 pick six. His running mate, TJ Watt, had 4 tackles, 1 sack, and scooped up that fumble and returned it for a touchdown for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that wraps up my Week 2 recap. Now I'll kind of just move into top threes in terms of some of the major stats around the league. And then we'll get into the HIM performance of the week, Week 2. So quick rundown here on the top threes. Passing yards, Tua leads with 715 yards. Kirk Cousins, 708. Matthew Stafford, 641. Passing touchdowns, Jordan Love, 6. Kirk Cousins, 6. Russell Wilson, 5. Receiving yards, Justin Jefferson, 309. Puka Nacua, 266. And Tyreek Hill, 255. Receiving touchdowns, Tyreek Hill has 3, while 16 players in the league have 2. Rushing yards, CMC has 268. Bijan Robinson, 180. And DeAndre Swift, 178 after having 175 on Thursday Night Football. And then for rushing touchdowns, 3 players have 3. Kyren Williams, Raheem Mostert, and Anthony Richardson. Leading the league in tackles right now is linebacker Zaire Franklin with 30. Bobby Wagner has 28, and TJ Edwards has 26 for the Chicago Bears. Leading the league in sacks, Daniel Hunter has 4, TJ Watt has 4, and then 6 players have 3. And then for interceptions, caught, Jordan Whitehead has 3. All of those came week 1 against Josh Allen. And then 3 players have 2, Jesse Bates, Christian Eisen, and Matt Milano. So those are, a quick rundown of the top threes, major stat categories around the league. And now it's time for the Week 2 HIM Performance of the Week. Some of the players in contention this week. It was a difficult week to choose a HIM Performance of the Week. A lot of players with very solid games. Some of the names in contention this week: DeAndre Swift, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Keenan Allen, Brian Robinson, Micah Parsons, Raheem Mostert, Alex Highsmith. And the winner of the Week 2 HIM Performance of the Week is Alex Highsmith. Alex Highsmith had 7 tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 1 interception, and 1 touchdown, coming off the edge for the Pittsburgh Steelers in a 26-22 victory over the Cleveland Browns. So congrats to Alex Highsmith for the HIM Performance of the Week award. Make sure to check out the Wedge 52 Gridiron Instagram tomorrow morning for the HIM Performance of the Week post and shout out for Alex Highsmith. Now just a quick rundown, quick off the top of the head preview for Week 3. Week 3 starts off a Thursday Night Football with the Giants at the 49ers. I think that, the Giants definitely have some things to figure out. They have looked shaky so far. Kind of their biggest sunshine of hope week 2 was Saquon, and he will be missing this game against the 49ers in San Fran. Next game, Falcons at Lions. It's going to be interesting to see Bijan Robinson continue to do his thing and kind of see if those Detroit Lions can bounce back with their aggressive tactics to, help them try and find a way to win. The Colts head to M&T Bank Stadium to play the Baltimore Ravens. It's going to be interesting to see Anthony Richardson's status throughout the week and see if that concussion rolls over to next Sunday. The Chargers travel to Minnesota to play the Vikings. These two teams are both 0-2. Both of these teams have played very good games, have had great performances from different players on their teams. One of them has to get a win this week. This game is going to be interesting. I'm definitely going to keep my eye on that one. Bills at Washington Commanders. Going to see, how legit the Commanders are. They're 2-0, I believe. Have looked solid. The Bills looked very good week 2, but week 1 we saw how bad they looked. So it really all depends on what Buffalo Bills team shows up on Sunday. The Saints play the Packers. Kind of battle of meh teams in my opinion. So we're going to see how that one rolls out. Titans play at the Browns. This one's going to be very interesting. Both teams have had, a big win, as well as, kind of a poor loss. So we're going to see how that shakes out. The Texans play the Jaguars. Rookie C.J. Stroud against Trevor Lawrence. This could potentially turn into a long-time quarterback battle within that division. This is going to be the first matchup of us seeing C.J. Stroud face off against Trevor Lawrence. It should be an exciting one. And then the Patriots play the New York Jets in New York. We're going to see if Mac Jones can get a little bit of help again. That Patriots offense looks very good. Patriots looked good against the Dolphins, just fell short. And then the New York Jets, Zach Wilson with the 4 turnovers, 3 picks, I believe. 4 turnovers on the season. 3 last week and 1 filling in for Aaron Rodgers on Monday Night Football. It's going to be interesting to see if Zach Wilson has another poor performance, how long the Jets decide to ride with him. Speaking of Broncos country, the Broncos face off against Dolphins at Dolphins this week. Explosive offense of that Dolphins was kind of tamed down against the New England Patriots. Broncos have not lived up to the hype of new coach Sean Payton up to this point. It's only been 2 weeks. So we're going to see if the Broncos have any answers to try and slow down that Dolphins defense or Dolphins offense like the Patriots D did, and potentially try and get that offense clicking again. They scored 33 points, so should be a good one. The Panthers head to the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks coming off a nice overtime victory, and the Panthers, lost that game. Close game to the Saints. Scored a touchdown late, got the 2, but, fell short. The Cowboys, who have looked very dominant in both of their games, head to Arizona to play the Cardinals. The Cardinals looked really good first 3 quarters against the Giants, and then fell apart. Cowboys have looked really good throughout the entirety of both games played for them. So that one could be a large points differential. We will see. The Bears head to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. I do not think that Justin Fields is going to fare well against that Chiefs defense, against Chris Jones. That Bears offensive line, I think, is going to struggle, as well as Justin Fields. And then Sunday Night Football action. Steelers at the Raiders. 2 all-time franchises in terms of the NFL history. In Las Vegas, Sunday Night Football. We're going to see what team is legit. If one of these teams can kind of make a noteworthy game to, kind of put them in the running for the division at the moment, or at least second place / wild card positioning for themselves early on here. And then we have another Monday Night Football doubleheader, the first of which is the Eagles at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That Eagles offense has still looked, very lackluster compared to what we became accustomed to last season. So I do expect them to turn that around soon. It could come here against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it'll be interesting to see if Baker Mayfield can continue to have the success that most people probably counted him out of. And then the other game to wrap up Week 3, the Monday Night Football second game of the doubleheader. The Rams travel to play the Cincinnati Bengals, 0-2 teams. The Rams offense looked really good on Sunday. The Bengals didn't look so hot on Sunday. Didn't look poor. That'll be an interesting game. One of them has to win. I think it'll be a very close back and forth battle. And I guess we'll see together who comes out on top. So now it's time for my Week 3 picks. Last week, during Week 2, my picks were 11-5. On the season so far, I am 20-12. So here is my Week 3 picks. 49ers over the Giants, Lions over the Falcons, Ravens over the Colts, Vikings over the Chargers, Bills over the Commanders, Packers over the Saints, Titans over the Browns, Jags over the Texans, and Patriots over the Jets, Dolphins over the Broncos, Seahawks over the Panthers, Cowboys over the Cardinals, Chiefs over the Bears, Raiders over the Steelers, Eagles over the Bucks, and the Bengals over the Rams. That's all I have for this episode of the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure you press that follow button on Spotify right here, as well as check out the Instagram at Wedge 52 Gridiron. That way you can stay up to date on all of the new podcast episodes that I'll be dropping. If you're a Ravens fan, make sure you check out yesterday's episode, Ravens Week 2 recap. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you all for listening once again, and go Ravens.